My guest today is Tudor Damian. Tudor, how are you today, sir?
Good, thank you.
It's
Nice
good to see your
nice
face.
to be back.
Yeah, I know it's back. It's been a couple of years since we've seen each other in person in Transylvania, where you're from.
That's
where
right.
You live. and I miss you, and I miss Cluj-Napoca.
Well, we'd be glad to have you here back again as soon as the situation allows it.
I hope so.
Yeah.
What do you do, Tudor, for a living?
I'm a certified ethical hacker, which means I hack people and companies that pay me to do it. That's basically legal hacking. I also deal with everything around digital transformation, moving to the cloud, and making sure that you use the right technology for the right purpose, and that technology doesn't become something that you do every day, that you can focus on your business, and technology is just something in the background that helps you do your job better. So that's what I've been focusing on for the past 10 plus years or so, mostly public cloud and security. I've been doing a lot of stuff before that in IT. I had my first computer back when I was 6 and started doing programming. Back then it was BASIC on a Spectrum machine with magnetic tapes and all of that stuff. So that's how I got started.
You started way younger than I did.
Yeah, but then I moved away from programming and around university. I used to do web development back then and a lot of stuff around that. But I discovered that infrastructure, servers, security interested me more. I found that a lot more fun and challenging at the same time. So
excellent.
I've done that since.
Now you mentioned that you're a certified ethical hacker. There's a lot to unpack in that phrase.
Yep.
You know, let's start with hacker. Hacker, you know, maybe largely thanks to Hollywood, has sort of got a bad reputation. When people think hacker, they think of the bad guys, the guys that are trying to break into your system. And I think in this context, that's sort of what you mean when you qualify it with the word ethical. Yep. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's correct. So the entire cybersecurity scene splits, if you will, the hackers into what are called white hat and black hat hackers. And this goes back to the old Western movies where the good guy always wore a white hat and the bad guy always had the black hat, and you knew who was the good guy.
More Hollywood references. I love it.
Yeah, more Hollywood references. But it's trying to move away from that idea that a hacker is someone in a hoodie sitting in a basement with like 7 monitors with the Matrix screensaver running in the background, and you've got that he's pressing 3 keys and he's got a red access denied message, and he says wait a minute, and like 10 seconds later he's got a green access granted kind of a thing. So the whole Hollywood idea of what a hacker is and what a hacker does is fairly skewed from what's going on in the real life, but at the same time, it's not that far away from how easy it is to do certain things if you know what you're doing. The ethical part is all about using that information, the same kind of stuff that a hacker knows, but using it for a noble purpose, to help people, to help companies protect themselves against known types of attacks and hackers and the bad guys, the bad hackers. And it's, in essence, it's doing a lot more than a bad guy does, because you need to know what the bad guy knows, but you also need to know how to prevent those attacks, how to protect yourself against those attacks. And the bad guy doesn't need to know that. He just needs to know how to get in, how to do whatever he wants to do and get out. So it's a lot more challenging, but at the same time, it's something that allows you to sleep better at night, knowing that you didn't do anything illegal. In fact, you actually helped put those tools and that knowledge to good use. And the knowledge itself is a tool, just like a hammer. Like you can build a house with a hammer, you can hit someone in the head with a hammer. It's all about how you use the tool. It's not about the tool itself. So
Yeah, I'll
the
take option
knowledge
A.
itself, yeah. The knowledge itself is not bad. Knowing how to hack into stuff is not bad if you only do it for a good purpose, or if you don't do it at all, right? You don't break into stuff for the sake of breaking into stuff. And the whole ethical side of things just goes down to how you use that knowledge. Like you walk down the street, you see a house that has its door ajar. Now you can go there, you can knock on the door or ring the doorbell and tell the owner, hey, your door was open. Or you can just go in and take a look and see what's there and then quickly get out. Or you can go in and call all your friends and tell them, hey, there's a free TV here, there's beer in the fridge, right? Do whatever, cause havoc, and leave with whatever you want. So it's all a matter of how you decide to act, knowing what you know or discovering what you discover.
So in the context of an ethical hacker, what are things that a hacker can do that are good or ethical?
Well, anything around protecting usually customers and companies and themselves and their friends and their family against common attacks, common threats that you might encounter in today's world out there on the internet. Everything nowadays is connected. Even maybe your fridge is connected to the internet and might be sending out spam. Like there's been cases in the past where smart devices have been hacked into and they were used to send out spam. So your TV, your weather controller device that tells you how many degrees are outside or whatever. If it's connected to the internet, it's something that people out there can probably hack into. So it's all about trying to prevent and detect those things, and also knowing how to respond to when something bad happens. It's not about if it happens, it's more about when it happens and being prepared for that and helping people.
Yeah. So what are some of the common threats from attackers?
The problem is that these kinds of attacks or these kinds of threats rarely change fundamentally. It's more about people not knowing how to use technology or using it wrong. And the attackers are going for either something that people usually do, and they do in a way that's easy to exploit, like the way you set your passwords. And attacks against passwords are a common thing. It just you just see a shift in how those attacks work. But it's not a fundamental thing. You still go against the passwords because the passwords are still things that prevent access to certain systems or things that help identify a certain person. Like there's that correlation between your email and your password. And if I know your email is public, so I just need to know your secret part, the password to get into a system. If I know those two things, I can get into that system and act as if I am you. I'm acting on your behalf. I'm doing this on your account. So for all intents and purposes, that system detects you as a legitimate user doing something that might be a bit off, might be a bit awkward, might be a bit different from what you usually do. And if the system doesn't detect this kind of anomalous behavior, that's where the bad guys can do whatever they want. And this thing hasn't changed much in recent years. It's just a matter of the techniques being used and the techniques being used to circumvent the potential solutions. Like the problem might be, for instance, that people use the same password everywhere because it's easier to remember.
Sure. It's just the name of my dog. So I
exactly.
Whoops, did I say that out loud?
your birth date and
I'm just
whatever.
kidding.
So,
my password is on this Post-it note right here.
yeah, it's exactly. So that idea that the current IT systems require users to create and remember a complex password, they'll just go through all lengths to try and make it as easy to remember as possible while still abiding to the complexity requirements. Like you need a password. So I go with Bob. Now you need both lowercase and uppercase letters. So then I put an uppercase B in the beginning. So now it's Bob with a capital B. No, you also need numbers. So I add a Bob1 at the end, and that's it. That's my password. Now you also need symbols. So I need to add an exclamation point or like an @ sign or a $sign at the end. And what people don't know is that this is the common way for other attackers to figure out what sort of password you might use based on the common dictionary words or the common things that people usually put into their passwords. If I know something about you, if I know the name of some of your extended family members or some favorite things that you like or the name of your dog.
Or my dog.
Exactly, or your birth date, I can use a combination of these things and then just add a 01, 02, 03 at the end, like people usually do when they have to put in a new password. So they just put the old password and add a 02 at the end or whatever, and that's a new password.
Yeah.
The problem with this is if you use the same password everywhere, I don't need to hack your password here. I just need to find a way to hack that one system or that one application or that one website that's more vulnerable. And if I get your password from there, I can then reuse it anywhere else that you've used.
Like my bank account.
Exactly. So a lot of situations in recent years saw this very thing happen. A lot of incidents, a lot of data breaches, where it wasn't the system itself that was vulnerable. It was that one user used the same password somewhere else. That location was hacked. And then the attackers, the bad guys, used the same login information to get access to the other system or application or website or whatever. So it wasn't that website or that cloud provider or that application was hacked. It was that people just used the same password or a less complex password. Anywhere between, I think, in most hacks in recent years, people like security researchers tend to do statistics on like what's the most common password, and it's 1 2 3 4 5 6. By the way, in recent years, it is, and in a lot of cases, that amounts to somewhere between 1% and 2% of users. Wow. Like you've got a website that's got 10 million users, and it gets hacked, and people check what the passwords are. And 2% of those users, so that's 1 in 50, use 1 2 3 4 5 6. Wow. There's others that use 1 2 3 4 5 or the name of the website or just really common passwords. So if I have a chance of 1 in 50 to use 1 2 3 4 5 6, that's exactly it's enough for me to get access. So I might not want to try all the passwords or the possible passwords for that one user. I could just try all the users and use 1 2 3 4 5 6 as the password and see how many of them I get. So there's things that happen that way, and this has shifted the types of attacks towards things like password spraying, where you don't try and hack one account with a lot of passwords. You just use 1 2 3 common passwords and you try out all of the accounts, because now you've got a lot of systems that have a lockout mechanism. Like if you try 3 4 5 wrong passwords, you get locked out. So if I want to avoid that, I just try one password. I just try 1 2 3 4 5 6. And if it doesn't work for this user, it might work for the next one. It's just every user in the system trying out 1Password from the system's perspective. It's not a bad guy trying to figure out a million passwords, a million different combinations for 1Password. So it's just the way the attacks change to adapt to the sort of solutions and precautions that the system or the website puts to try and prevent those kinds of attacks. But
so where does the ethical hacker come into this to help prevent that?
One is education, trying to help the users and usually the companies, trying to help them understand how to make better use of the technology, how to correctly figure out a password policy, for instance, things like using multi-factor authentication or things like using a password manager and creating a random password for every website, not reusing the same password everywhere. And
so some of those bits of advice are for the people that are maintaining the site, and others are for the users who are creating the passwords.
For the users. Exactly. So it's both something that goes to helping improve or make better use of the technology behind things, and others are targeted at the users themselves and making them just helping them understand why a certain thing might be better off done in a certain way, like using or not reusing your password or using a more complex password using a password manager. So education is one thing. Technology solutions are another. Doing some form of, say, audit, or it's also sometimes called a penetration test, where you try to get into a system, try to get into a website or a server or a network in the same way that a bad guy, a black hat hacker, if you will, would. And you try and figure out whether there's a way to get in. And if there is, it's better off for you to find it early than waiting until one of the bad guys finds it. Usually with some automated tools left overnight, and by morning they just check and see how many other servers and websites they've hacked overnight.
I see.
Yeah, so
you basically pretend to be the bad guy to find those vulnerabilities and then communicate those vulnerabilities back to the company.
Help implement solutions as well.
All right.
If the company can't find a way to do it themselves, or they don't have the knowledge, the time to do it, and so on, I can help them do it as well. I can help either teach their team on how to do it so that they can do it in the future and manage it, or I can do it for them and tell them, hey, this is what I've done. If anyone else comes in and asks, you can tell them that this is what has been done.
I see. Now, at the beginning of this conversation, you introduced yourself as a certified ethical hacker. Tell me about the certified part.
So it's the certified part is just one of the well-known common certifications in the industry. It's not the only one. There's a number of others. I just went for this one because it sounds good. Right?
It does sound pretty cool. It's got the words certified, ethical, and hacker. Exactly. Three cool words combined.
Some of the others just sound a bit too technical. And the certified part means that, yes, I went ahead, I took an exam, and it's the kind of exam that you spent, I think it was a 4-hour exam or something like that. And one thing I like about, so the company behind the certification, it's called EC Council. One of the things that they do is they also do a background check. If they find that you might be too young to get like a 97% score on an exam, they will ask for your credentials or a background to prove that you do have those skills and you didn't just go out there and got like a brain dump, like a list of the answers off the internet and just came in, took the exam.
That does not sound ethical.
Yeah, it doesn't, but people do that with a lot of other exams. I know with Microsoft exams, that happens a lot.
I'm shocked.
Yeah, everyone should be, right? Nobody knows that this is something that happens. So they do want to ensure that if people do get the certification, they they do have the credentials and the background and the knowledge to show for it. And it's one of those certifications that you can get renewed. I think it's every 3 years, and you have to provide proof that you've done stuff like attended conferences and given talks at conferences and published articles and things like that, so that you can keep that certification.
Which you do a lot of.
Which, yes, I do a lot of. So that means every 3 years I have to give them a list of all the stuff that I've done, and they just extend that certification. There's another level, which is a licensed pen tester. That goes through this whole process where they give you access to an environment, and they tell you've got 2 weeks to like hack away at it, and then give us a report. And then you'll end up in sort of like an exam format with a couple of people doing an assessment on what you wrote and asking you questions like university. Like you go in front of the teacher and you present like, this is what I found. This is the audit report that I ended up with. Here's what I did. And those guys need to be licensed pen testers as well, and they are the ones that will give you the certification. So it's more of a formal human kind of interaction with that. So that's one of the reasons I went with this route. There's a lot of other certifications out there, and they're really, I think, just as good from a technical standpoint, and they're valid. And some of them are more like sought after from like a compliance perspective. Like we need people with any sort of CompTIA certification on security or like things like that. But I just went for this one because, like I mentioned in the beginning, it sounds better and it's easy to explain all three sides. Like certified means I gave an exam that show that, yes, I know some of these things. Ethical is the ethical part we talked about, and the hacker part we also talked about. So, yeah.
Very cool. Before I let you go, I want to ask you about IT Camp, which is where I first met you. It's a conference that you've been running for, gosh, 10 years maybe?
10 years, yeah. We should have had the 10th edition.
So the pandemic disrupted this whole thing. What's the status of it now?
So right now it's on hold. We are still looking at ways to have it in person safely, and it is the kind of experience that we've always seen as an in-person experience. It's more than just an online conference where people just come in and present stuff and maybe you've got some Q&A. It's also about what happens during the breaks and on the like in between the sessions and not just during the sessions. And since you've been there quite a few times, the sort of discussions that you have with people like after your session is over and during lunch and all throughout the day, the fact that all the speakers end up also attending other sessions because we try and find interesting topics and interesting people to bring in to have them talk about those topics.
I'll also interject that this was especially valuable for me because I'm from nowhere near Romania. I'm from the United States, and I got a chance to meet not only Romanians, but also people from all over the world because it's very much an international conference, which was really good for me.
Yeah, so it's something that we've focused on since the beginning, and we're still looking at ways to see how we can continue that in the future. We're still looking at ensuring that it's an in-person event as much as possible, or at least a hybrid event, because now that's becoming a thing. But it's certainly something that we want to resume at some point. We've had to cancel last year and this year, and we're still not sure about next year with how things are looking at this point. But
that's fair. Typically, it's late spring, early summer, I think is when you
exactly have it. Late May, early June. And it's in Transylvania. So it's easier to tell people instead of telling them it's in Cluj or it's in Romania, you just tell them Transylvania. And
everybody's heard of Transylvania. Yeah. Which, by the way, is a beautiful region. I just absolutely love Transylvania.
it is.
Is there anything we haven't discussed that you think we should?
I'm not sure. I think maybe stuff about how people are treating security during the pandemic and how the pandemic has changed that. Because I think that's one of the most common topics I discuss nowadays with people. Like, is there something about the pandemic that has changed or shifted in the way of how we do security or how we handle security?
Well, we're almost at time, but if you have a quick elevator pitch about what's different,
yeah, sure.
then we can maybe make this another conversation, go in depth.
I mean, sure. It's certainly something that is to be kept in mind. That yes, the pandemic has changed the way we look at security, the way we look at remote work, and how do we ensure that people, say, working from home, have the same level of security on their devices and on the systems that they work from or connect to as they used to do back when they were in the office. Right. So that's certainly one challenge that came with this. The challenge of finding yourself with a lot of people working remotely overnight and your VPN connection not being enough for all of them to do whatever they were doing back in the office. So it's a lot of stuff around that. It's a lot of exploits and attacks around the pandemic itself and trying to trick people into clicking links based on the current latest events, right? So there's been a lot of attacks of that sort, but it's mostly both people working from home and the IT staff working from home and not being there when stuff happens and not being always present and always monitoring everything like they would back when they would work from the office. That's also affecting the way attacks work. It's easier to start an attack on times that you know people are going to be off hours and away and just do whatever you want to do without getting caught. So yes, there's been changes and there's been solutions to that as well and approaches to that as well. But it's certainly a shift that a lot of people are seeing, and a lot of people went as far as trying to figure out on their own what they can do better when it comes to security. It's also about personal security, and the way I usually talk about this in any trainings or like with people that I discuss the topic with, it's more important for people to understand how security affects them on a personal level, because that's when they will put in the effort to ensure that the company data and company devices are just as secure. Because once you know certain things and once you know how security can affect you personally, it's stuff that you can't ignore anymore wherever you go work or wherever you go, like on vacation, or like using a personal device and using a work device is just the same. As long as you know what could happen, it's hard to ignore it in a personal or professional environment.
I'll tell you what, this sounds like a really deep topic, and so I'm going to cut you off there, and let's talk about this in a few months, and because I think we can go dive deep in it. It sounds really fascinating.
I would.
It'll give us an excuse to chat again, which we don't do often enough.
I would love that.
And in the meantime, Tudi, thank you so much for your time, and you stay safe.
Yeah, thank you. You too. When it comes to technology, it's rarely about the tools and the applications, and it's always more about the friends you make along the way and the things you learn from them and with them. Technology always changes, but friends will stay with you for a lot more.